drug that was created.
Hello, Elizabeth Clements here from Live Blood Online. Thank you very much for joining us on this meeting with Dr. Okker, who's going to be answering your questions about choosing the right microscope for live blood analysis. And also, thank you very much for sending your questions in. If you do have any further questions, please put them in the chat box at the bottom of the screen, and then we'll be posing them to Dr. Okker. So hello everyone, and please share your screen and join in if you can. So I'm going to be putting some of your questions to Dr. Okker now. If you have any of your questions, please put them in the chat box below. So one of the most common questions, Dr. Okker, is, can you tell us what's needed in a microscope for live blood analysis?
Yes, absolutely. And welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. So yes, it's a fairly common question, and also something that people are not always familiar with when starting out with live blood analysis. Microscopes are, a completely different field, and most people are not familiar with the terminology, and certainly not aware with regards to the type of specifications that are needed. So what you would really need to look for is specifically a microscope for dark field live blood analysis. And there are actually a very special set of specifications that are needed in a microscope for dark field live blood analysis, quite different from what is required for other applications where dark field is used. So very important to be able to use your equipment so you're able to actually see, or have the type of equipment that will allow you to see everything that you're actually learning about in the course. So the quickest and simplest thing really the first thing to check would be to look at the strength of the light source. That usually separates the microscopes that may be compatible or suitable for live blood analysis from the ones that definitely will not be. So firstly, look at the strength of the light source, and just in terms of parameters, the sort of basic minimum requirements for dark field microscopy is 50 watts halogen, or the equivalent in LED. So our top of the range microscope, the HDMI LED system, has a 9-watt LED light source, which is equivalent to about 100-watt halogen. So that's the sort of level of brightness that's required. Anything below that won't really create the amount of brightness needed for proper dark field, and as a result, you won't really get the contrast that's needed, where you're actually able to see all the small, finer structures in the background, between the cells. We're not actually really concerned with looking only at the cells, but there are also things between the cells that's much finer and fainter, more difficult to see. And that's actually where dark field becomes valuable, is that it allows us to see these things that are not normally, visible.
So without the right lighting, you won't be able to do a really accurate live blood analysis?
Yeah, absolutely, Elizabeth. And that's usually the first thing to check. So when attendees send us links to microscopes that they found online for us to see whether they actually are suitable, the first thing really is just to look at the strength of the light source, and that usually will tell you whether it's going to be compatible or not. And most microscopes out there are equipped with a 20-watt halogen light source, or the equivalent in LED, which is usually about 3-watt LED. And that's the sort of industry standard. Most applications for microscopy have those requirements. It's a 20-watt type of level of brightness that's needed. Live blood analysis is quite unique, in that it requires such a strong light source. So usually it gives you a good enough indication, as to whether the microscope will be suitable or not.
Yeah, I know we often get attendees that actually buy a microscope that just doesn't have the adequate lighting. And
yeah, the trouble is that, often these microscopes are advertised as dark field, often advertised as dark field live blood analysis microscopes. unfortunately, by microscope suppliers that simply don't know what the actual requirements are.
Okay, thank you. And do you supply microscopes for live blood analysis?
Well, yes, we do. We actually supply microscopes that are built according to our own specifications for live blood analysis. The reason for that is that normally with the normal types of setups that are available with most microscopes, they don't actually have the requirements that are necessary for proper dark field live blood analysis. So usually, with choosing a different type of microscope, one has to make some sort of compromise in terms of the specifications. So that's why we have ours specifically built so that it has all the features that are actually needed for microscopy.
Okay, and this is another quite common question. Are your microscopes made in China?
No, so our microscopes are actually manufactured for us by a company in Japan, and they're manufactured for us according to our own specifications. So there are lots of microscopes manufactured in China, and most of those microscopes sold online by these sort of online microscope companies are actually all sourced from China. And although there are some that are quite good quality and may be useful, most of them, when you look at the actual components, they're quite low grade components, and often some of the interior parts of the microscopes that actually need to withstand, continued use, like the gears and the focusing mechanism, are often made of inferior materials that tend to break quite easily. So, the lifespan of the microscope also then becomes a problem.
Okay, thank you. And Fiona's asking, could you just go over the 10V, the 20 times eyepiece? Is it an extra add-on with the microscope 9-watt LED HDMI with an extra cost? If so, how much is it? Is it worth it, or does the microscope you sell come with both?
Okay, no, the microscope comes equipped standard with 10 times eyepieces. So the magnification through the eyepieces, then what you would be able to achieve would be 40 times to 1,000 times. That's based on the objectives and then the 10 times eyepiece. The benefit with the 20 times eyepiece is that you will have additional magnification. So instead of going up to 1,000 times magnification, you'd be able to achieve 2,000 magnification through the eyepieces. But of course, then also the magnification when looking at dry blood would be far higher, which then makes it a bit difficult when looking at dry samples to work out where you actually are looking at, because with dry blood, we actually want the lowest level of magnification. So the 20 times eyepiece is an additional add-on. You can purchase it separately and then use it. They slide into the head piece of the microscope, so they're not very difficult to change. So, if you do want to have that additional magnification through the eyepieces, it would be a feasible, add-on to use. However, we get this additional magnification going to the camera. So there's about a factor of 4 difference between the magnification through the eyepieces and on the camera. So when you're using the 100 times objective through the eyepieces with the normal 10 times eyepieces, you would get 1,000 times magnification, and then on the viewing screen it would be about 4,000 times. And that of course doesn't change with the 20 times eyepieces, because they work independently, the eyepieces and the camera. But there is this additional magnification on the screen, so that would be higher than what you would get with 20 times eyepieces.
Thank you. Juan is asking, could you please share the prices, or at least an estimate, of a good quality microscope?
All right, so our top of the range microscope sells for just under $8,000 US. That is the microscope and the camera attachment. And that's a specialized microscope then for dark field and bright field live blood analysis. There are other models in the range from about $6,000 up, depending on the type of light source. So we also have a 50-watt halogen light source available, which is a bit cheaper. And then we have an entry-level type of camera available as well that is less expensive than the top of the range system.
Okay, the entry-level microscope is only for attendees, right?
Yes, we have an entry-level system that has all the essential features for microscopy without losing any quality in dark fields, without compromising on anything that you'll be able to see in blood samples that we have available for attendees only, and that's just over $4,500.
Okay, thank you. How much is shipping to Arizona?
Well, shipping is actually included with our microscopes, so the prices basically include free shipping with DHL, and that's international shipping, so to your door.
Okay, and what happens if the microscope breaks down or is damaged?
Well, we have a 2-year warranty with the microscope. If anything happens during that time, if anything needs to be replaced, we have stock of parts and it would be sent to you by courier then as well. If it's after that period, then those parts would obviously need to be purchased. But as I said, the parts are available. The microscopes are also fairly modular, so not very complicated, not very difficult to remove parts and change things. And of course, they are built to be sturdy and reliable and to sort of withstand regular use. These are things that people become dependent on, in their practices, and they use it on a daily basis. So it's built to be reliable as well.
Thanks. And Juan is asking, is it compatible with Apple PC?
Yeah, so the software supplied with the microscope to connect the camera to the computer is compatible with Apple and Windows operating systems. The top of the range microscope also has a separate video output, a separate HDMI video out port on the camera itself, which allows you to connect the camera directly to a separate monitor to its HDMI input. And that's also a very, very useful tool. So you can use it simultaneously whilst connected to a computer, or you can use it completely on its own, just connected to a monitor.
Okay, thanks. And Vernon is asking, after purchasing the microscope, do you have recommended places in the US where the microscope needs to be fixed or maintained?
Well, there's not really regular servicing required on the microscopes. They're built to last. There's not really it's not really necessary to send them in for a yearly tune-up or anything like that. We do supply instructions on general care and maintenance of the microscope, and anything major that needs to be replaced, we would ship through replacement parts and detailed instructions on how to replace a part. Because these microscopes are so specialized, usually the normal microscope technicians don't actually know how to properly set these microscopes up for dark field. That's quite specialized, and often we've had cases in the past where someone had serviced a microscope and then the settings were not so great, and they were not actually able to see properly after that. So it is best to, if there is anything specific, we always recommend that people contact us directly for support.
And you might already have answered this. Do you teach us how to use the microscope?
Yes, absolutely. There's information on the basic use of the microscope included, in the microscope package. And then, of course, as part of the training course, we teach attendees how to specifically take blood samples to view under the microscope for live and dry blood analysis, and then the settings to use, to actually view those samples.
Okay, great. Thank you. And do I need to have a microscope for taking the training course?
It's not a requirement to have a microscope to enroll in the course, but to complete the course, you would need access to a microscope to complete your case study, which is the final requirement for certification. We do allow some time for this. We usually allow for up to a year for attendees to send in their case studies, and we do provide extensions where necessary. So it's not essential to have a microscope, as soon as you join the course, but also attendees usually find that a lot of the information tends to start falling into place once they actually start working with blood samples. Before seeing actual samples, it's all a bit abstract and all theory, but once you actually start working with blood samples, a lot of it starts making a lot more sense.
Thanks. Fiona's asking, could you recommend a company that would make up a carry case for the microscope once it's all made up, connected, of course, for international plane travel? Or points I should stipulate if I manage to find a company that could make me a bespoke case?
Yes, absolutely. We have information on this that we usually send out to attendees. It is a very good idea to get a proper case for the microscope that would accommodate the microscope once it's assembled. So, to avoid having to disassemble any parts. Dust, of course, is a major risk. So, once the microscope is assembled, it's best to keep everything in its assembled state just to prevent dust from getting into anything important. So we do have information on this. We have usually the Nanook range of cases is what we recommend to our US attendees. And there's a specific one, if my memory is correct, it's the Nanook 950. I think is the correct size, but we also send the actual dimensions of the assembled microscope as well, so that attendees can check the inner dimensions of the cases to ensure that the microscope will fit.
Thank you. Do you recommend that we cover with a microscope cover at all times when not in use?
When not in use, it is best to cover the microscope. The microscope does come with a dust cover. So definitely when it's not in use, it's best to have everything switched off and the microscope covered with the dust cover.
Thanks. Fiona's saying, I'm in the UK. Any recommendations there?
Yes, absolutely. We have a few links that we usually send. I think it's actually on Amazon, but for delivery in the UK, some hard shell, wheelie cases that are the correct dimensions as well.
Okay, I'm not sure if Fiona is referring to the carry case. Yes, I think she is, yeah. Okay, yes, she means the carry cases. Okay, and when is the next training course?
Well, the next course is in September. The live classes will start on Tuesday, the 26th of September. We have already started enrolling students, and once attendees are enrolled, even before the start of the September live classes, they'll have access to the online training materials, so they can start working through some of the theory, if they'd like, before the beginning of the actual live classes in September.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Fiona's saying that she must have missed those links, so I'm just making a note to, we'll send you those links tomorrow, Fiona. Links to the carrying case. Just make a note of that. Okie dokie. And do you know of any practice in Georgia that has a microscope where I can complete my case study? That's from Vernon.
Georgia, the US, the state.
Is
I'm
that Georgia, US,
assuming not the
Vernon?
country in Europe.
Yeah, yes, US.
All right. I'm not sure offhand. I know we have a large number of attendees from the US, but I'm not sure if there are any in the state of Georgia.
Vernon, I'll send you a link to the practitioners list, so you can see some of our practitioners in the US, and hopefully find someone there. And also, if you email us that question, I can put it on the private Facebook page to put out there to any practitioners that are in that area and ask them to contact you. So if you could email that into us, please. Okay, and do you cover how to treat long COVID and problems after the JAB?
Yeah, we often have questions about this in the training course. It's not part of the training materials. It's not part of the actual course, but it is a question that comes up frequently during the lessons. So we do go over protocols that are commonly used for, for long COVID and the effects from the jab.
Juan is saying, any concerns about electrical compatibility? I'm in Colombia, South America. We use here 120 volts.
All right. No, there wouldn't be any problem. We supply these microscopes to clients all over the world. They work well in the US with the US power system there, as well as all over Europe and the rest of the world. So definitely won't be any problem. We also ship the microscopes with the necessary plugs to actually attach, and plug the microscope into your wall sockets as well.
Okay, thanks. Do they need much maintenance, the microscopes?
No, there's really no need for maintenance. There are also not really any sort of common wear and tear items, so not really components that would need to be replaced on a regular basis. The microscopes are really built to withstand regular use. So your maintenance is not really a requirement, as long as, of course, you manage dust and also oil. So your immersion oil, if that ends up on the stage and then ends up on the other lenses and objectives, then of course it would be a problem and would need to be cleaned. But usually, with the normal use of the microscope, if used according to our recommendations, that wouldn't be a problem.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Well, that's the end of the questions that people have sent in. So if you have any more questions, please put them in the chat box there. Do you have anything to show us, Dr. Okker? Comparisons or?
Yeah, absolutely. Just a few images, Elizabeth, just actually taken from some of the case studies and images sent in by past attendees. It's quite interesting for me. I grade and go through case studies that attendees send in, and can usually see right away, if the microscope that they're using is actually a proper microscope with the correct specifications, or if it's a microscope that's not really ideal for live blood analysis. So I have a few examples just to show, so we can actually see what type of images you would get with an inferior type of microscope and what type of images you should actually be getting with your dark field microscope.
Marvelous. Okay, it must be quite obvious then immediately, yes?
Absolutely. So I have the images, and we can go through them, and we can see which ones look good and which ones don't.
Okay, I've given you access to the screen, so
I see that. All right, let me just share my screen here. All right, let's just change this to the slide so it's a bit better. Okay. There's this one. All right, that should be better. Okay, so first image here. All right, so this is a dark field image. This is with the HDMI LED microscope. And with the 40 times objective being used. So we looking at about 1,600 times magnification on the screen here. Some of you may not be familiar with some of the components here and what we're looking at, but these circular types of patterns on the screen here are the red blood cells. And what we're really concerned with here, especially with dark field, would be all the faint structures in between. So all these white lines and blotches in the plasma between the blood cells, that's often where the interesting things are in the blood, and often the things that we need to be able to identify to properly work with clients with live blood analysis. These lines, incidentally, that are on the screen there, is actually, it's something that's quite common. We see this on a very regular basis in clients. It's something related to liver stress, also related to an increased risk of coagulation. So people that are prone to things like blood clots and so on, poor circulation. But often the underlying issue that we need to address with this is the liver. So often liver and digestion, but very important to be able to see these. And these are actually quite faint. Now, in a normal bright field setup, when looking at this in a normal bright field microscope, these lines are not visible at all. And also, if you're using a dark field microscope that doesn't have the correct specifications and settings for live blood analysis, then these will also not be visible at all. So that's an example of what we should be able to see. The next image, if it will load, there we are, is from a different type of microscope. This is actually one of the microscopes advertised and sold as a live blood analysis dark field microscope. It's also recommended by some of the other training institutions as something that's suitable for dark field live blood analysis. But as I say, the proof is in the pudding, and we can see very clearly here, this is the magnification that's achieved with the 40 times objective. We can see the level of contrast here. You can actually see the outlines of the red blood cells, but you really can't see much else, in between. We can see some patterns and some blotches in the background. And often there would be interesting and important things that we would be able to see, but with this level of clarity, it simply isn't possible.
You can't see much in the plasma at all, can you?
Absolutely. So, an image like this, Elizabeth, really would tell you about the same as what you would see with bright field. There almost is no additional benefit from doing dark field in this case, because it doesn't actually show what we usually should be able to see with dark field. So it's quite frustrating for people to actually work with systems like this, because you're constantly wondering what is there that you're not seeing, because it's very clear that that there are things there that are simply not visible.
Well, part of live blood analysis is looking for the microbial forms in the plasma, isn't it?
Absolutely, and that's why we also need at least 1,000 times magnification. So with our microscopes, we're able to achieve that high magnification because of additional magnification going to the camera. So when using the 40 times objective, we're actually getting about 1,600 times magnification, which is this level of magnification here. Now with the normal system, normal microscopes don't have that feature. So to achieve a high level of magnification, you actually need to use the 100 times objective. And that also has its own set of challenges, because it's quite difficult working with that objective. And if it's not a very high end objective, it also allows through too much light, and it becomes quite difficult to see. Let's have a look at another example here. Right, so I think it's quite obvious that this is also a good quality dark field image. We can see a lot of detail there, a lot of detail between the cells, all these thin, fine lines, these faint sort of structures in between are very, very clearly visible. And that's really what we want. You can see fine, thin strands coming off the blood cells, all these things that take place. And I have a few examples of some other things that we see in the blood as the blood starts to break down, as it degenerates. We often find a lot of really interesting structures that emerge, and that all quite significant and important to be able to see, but they are really thin and quite faint.
So you wouldn't see those with an inferior microscope then?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can compare that image to the image on the screen now. And again, you can see the outlines of the red blood cells. We can see the bright structure in the center. There's a white cell. There's actually another white blood cell in the sort of upper right-hand side here. Quite a faint structure there, but that's actually a monocyte. You really can't see much around there, and that gives you the type of idea, as to the sort of level of contrast. That the monocyte is quite faint. We really can't see much clarity there, and that's actually what we should actually be able to see more. So again, here a lot more going on in the background, but we're simply not able to see it.
You can't see anything in the plasma there.
Yeah, well, compared to this, then, we can see, again, looking between the cells, looking at these structures in the plasma, we can see this sort of tubular shaped structure here, this other sort of long elongated structure coming off this other blood cell here. These are all really important and quite important to be able to see. This tells us about what has been going on with the terrain over a period of time. Not information that you'd want to miss, because it really guides you in terms of what you can expect with the case as well. At the bottom, we have a monocyte here, a white blood cell with some strands coming off it as well. So, all these patterns these are the things that actually make a live blood analysis session important. These are the things that we look for. Right, so another microscope that's sold and advertised as a dark field live blood analysis microscope, and this is the type of quality of image that that one would get with it. So that's also why, if you want to save yourself the trouble of learning all the terminology and becoming familiar with what all the terms and parts of the microscope mean and what they're for, a simple way to get past all of that is to just simply ask for a sample image of live blood in dark field with the microscope. So if you're considering buying a microscope for live blood analysis, ask for a sample image of a live blood sample in dark field specifically, to actually see what it looks like. And looking at this image, you can see right away that it certainly doesn't have what it should have, for dark field.
And also attendees can also send in any microscopes that they are looking at, and you'll be able to tell them if they're suitable, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell them if they're suitable, and also if they're not, why they're not suitable. So, I'll look at the actual specifications and compare with the specifications that we know are important, and then explain what, where the microscope actually falls short. It's quite interesting in this image, the upper left-hand side here, we can see some faint patterns in the background there, almost as if there is something there. These may actually be platelets, thrombocytes, and often we see interesting things happening around thrombocytes as well, which, in this case, unfortunately, we can't. Right, so another proper dark field image with the HDMI LED microscope. We have some interesting things here. We have actually a group of thrombocyte aggregation in the center of the image here, and some bubble shaped structures around there as well. This is quite a fairly strong indicator for leaky gut syndrome, something that we encounter very frequently in practice, and often is the underlying issue, intestinal permeability, the underlying issue in many chronic illnesses. So being able to identify this is really, really very valuable, and we're able to monitor this and, obviously track progress during treatment. So again, these are the faint little bubble shaped structures in the background, also related to fermentation, also very important to be able to see.
Juan is asking, are environmental toxicities approachable with dark field microscopy? Microplastics, for example.
Well, there are indicators for toxicity that we see in the blood. In live blood, we really see signs of the effects of toxins. So we would see damage to the blood cells and, stress on the organs of elimination as a result of that. Dry blood analysis often helps to guide us in terms of where the toxins are coming from. Because of the map that we use when looking at the dry blood sample, we often would find indicators that the toxicity may be more environmental based on where specific patterns show up in the dry blood. So yes, there is some guidance with regards to the anomalies there.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to the next image. Right. Again, also an inferior microscope system. This also, because you may wonder why the image looks grainy. It's actually also because of the type of camera being used. This actually looks to me like an older type of analog type of camera, the older type of cameras that they used to use with microscopes. But again, we can see, looking at the patterns or what we can see, or well, in this case, can't see between the cells, there's really not much visible there at all.
Not much detail.
No, not at all. And there would actually be lots of interesting things visible here. We have a thrombocyte there. There definitely would be things around there that we would be able to see. Also in most dark field samples, across the board, we would see some small motile, moving particles between the cells called chylomicrons. And those we see usually in most samples. So if you're looking at a dark field sample and you're not able to see any small reflective spots between the cells, that's already a sign that the microscope doesn't have what it should have for dark field. So here we can see, quite a few of these small little white dots. Those aren't actually imperfections in the glass. Those are actually structures in the blood, and in a live sample they actually move around quite actively. So it's important to be able to see them, because if you're not, you also won't be able to see the other structures. So here we have some really interesting things happening in the blood, and these are also these fine lines that are here towards the center of the image are also usually active, and they're moving around. Sort of grayish pattern on towards the right hand side is also fibrin, also related to liver stress, but an earlier stage of liver stress before we get thick and interconnected white lines. We get this type of hazy pattern, and this is even more difficult to see than those thick established lines. Right, so another example of a dark field image that's not quite optimal. We're not really seeing the clarity and the contrast that we should be able to see. I hope it's becoming obvious, what we actually want to see in a dark field sample. So here again, we're not really seeing much clarity. We can see some patterns between the cells, some structures that may be thrombocytes, some structures that may be lymphocytes or perhaps ghost cells. Again, lack of contrast, lack of clarity, and also the level of magnification. It's not quite at the level of magnification that we need for live blood analysis. So often, you often end up asking questions rather than getting answers. You're unsure of what you're seeing. It may be this or it may be that, and there may also be other things that are not visible at all. So quite difficult to use live blood analysis to its full potential, if you're not able to actually see everything.
You'd just be guessing with that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And, the value of live blood analysis is that it often takes the guesswork away. You often work out exactly what needs to be done, and you can focus on those issues, test again, and see whether those patterns have resolved. and then work with the next thing. So if you have a good system and you obviously have been trained properly, then live blood analysis makes things a lot easier. But if you're not able to see everything, then it doesn't, and it becomes actually more difficult. So here we have another good dark field image, very, very clear. We can see all those structures between the blood cells very, very clearly. We can very clearly see that these small spherical shapes, these little circles all over between the cells. These are all signs of fermentation, so related to Candida. Very important to be able to see this. Of course, many people out there are told that they have Candida and, follow a diet or some sort of protocol to get it under control. And often people are not sure whether things are getting better, if it's changing, or if it's having any sort of effect, or if it's actually Candida at all. Often it's something else. So this really helps to answer the questions.
That's about the money and stuff. Okay. Just very quickly, there is a lady that booked 2 days on the 24th and 20th. It tells you I'm trying to contact her. If she could swap, then you could save more. Okay. So I'm just keep posted.
Sorry, whoever is on a conversation there, could you please mute yourself?
Just knock on the door. I'll show you. So you won't.
Hello.
On Thursday, I'm not working.
Okay.
So
yes, I'll show you the house.
I'm going to try and mute everybody. Just hang on, Dr. Okker.
All right, no problem, no worries.
Right, according to my list, everyone's muted.
Okay.
So please continue.
All right, no problem. So we have another image here. Also, I think quite obvious by now that it's not a great dark field image. Again, the clarity is lacking. We're not really seeing anything between the blood cells here, and you'd end up just guessing what might be there, and what you might be missing as well. Also here, the magnification isn't what it should be. So at this level of magnification, this would be with the normal microscope setup using the 40 times objective. This is the type of magnification that you would achieve, and it's not the optimal magnification for live blood analysis. So you could zoom into this digitally and enlarge the image, but with that sort of zooming in digitally, you often get pixelation and lose clarity, and don't actually see what you should be able to see anyway. So it's another limitation with a standard type of microscope setup. If you don't have the additional magnification going to the video camera, you often struggle to get the magnification required for proper live blood analysis. All right, so these last few images, Elizabeth, these are just some that I've added on here just to show the level of magnification that we're able to get with the 100 times objective. So if I just, let's see if this works. If I skip back to the previous slide, this is with the 40 times objective. So this is about 1,600 times magnification. Let me skip past this one. And that's then with the 100 times objective. So this is about a 4,000 times magnification. It's a very high level of magnification, and often a bit too high for the normal identification of anomalies that we usually look for in live blood analysis, but really useful to have when we're looking at microbes and various pleomorphic growth forms as well, because those tend to be quite small and very faint. So we can actually see in this image on the right-hand side there, this bright structure here is a white blood cell, and we can see these strange root-like growths extending out of the cell at the bottom there. So these are changes that indicate some parasitism. Very important to be able to see this, and really great to get this type of magnification so we're able to see these patterns. I think I have one more. There's also another white blood cell. This is a monocyte. Also 4,000 times magnification using the 100 times objective, and you can see these extensions from this white blood cell as well. I think this is the final image. Just again, the 100 times magnification, and some of the pleomorphic forms that we often look for in dark field as well. So you can see these quite clearly there, and this is with the 100 times objective. And again, with the incorrect settings, if you don't have the correct strength in the light source, which is the first and one of the most important things to look for, and then if you don't have the right type of dark field condenser, then obviously you're not going to get the clarity that you should get, and these structures won't be visible in the plasma at all. So there are some structures, some pleomorphic growth forms and some other structures and anomalies that we usually only see in dark field, but when they're quite severe and quite advanced, they then become visible in bright field and in some of the inferior dark field systems. But you know, the point of doing live blood analysis is for us to identify things at an early point so that we're able to make changes and you know fix the imbalance before it actually becomes severe. So the earlier we're able to identify something, the better. So you know, why have a system that doesn't allow you to do that? You know, you're only able to see something when it's quite advanced already. You're also then not able to use blood analysis to its full potential.
Not at all, no.
These are just our contacts. So that's the end of the slides. I hope that was helpful, and I hope that actually showed the differences between a proper dark field live blood analysis system and you know a microscope that claims to have the correct settings for dark field, but you know obviously clearly does not. So I hope that makes it more obvious, and that people would have a better understanding of what you should be looking for in a dark field system.
Well, thank you very much for that. Connell says I have to log off the call. Look forward to the recording. So no problem. We'll be sending you all a recording. Judy's asking, would we see nanoparticles, technology, graphene oxide, heavy metals, synthetic parasites in dark field analysis?
Yeah, so our attendees that have actually been in the course, we have quite a few attendees that have gone through the training with us that have been researching this and have found patterns in the blood of their patients and of their clients. And we also have, and the attendees that have actually found these things are attendees that are using our microscopes because of the level of clarity and the magnification that you're able to achieve. So some of these structures, especially the really large structures, would be visible with a different type of microscope. But many of these structures are also quite faint and also quite fine, and only really visible with a good quality dark field system with a high level of magnification and of course a high level of contrast.
Thank you. And Olinda is asking, would we be able to see all of these elements clearly in the entry-level microscope?
Yes, absolutely. So the entry-level microscope will allow you to see everything that we looked at, with the exception, of course, of the last few slides that we looked at. So the entry-level doesn't have the 100 times objective. That's also one of the reasons why the cost of the entry-level microscope is significantly lower. The 100 times objective is quite a specialized objective. It's not a standard type of 100 times objective. It has a built-in iris diaphragm that allows you to control the amount of light going through the objective, and that is quite essential for it to actually work for dark fields. Normal 100 times objectives allow through too much light and you're not really able to see. So the 100 times objective isn't supplied as part of the entry-level package, but the microscope does have slots for the additional objectives, so they can be purchased later on and added to the system.
Okay, so they get added on later.
Absolutely, yeah, and as I said earlier, the 100 times objective, the magnification that we achieve there is actually a little too high for your normal identification of normal live blood anomalies, but it is really great for zooming into those microbes and those pleomorphic growth forms. So great to have for additional work, but not essential as part of the normal dark field analysis.
Okay, thank you. So any more questions, please put them in the questions box here. Fiona says, yeah, thank you. Yes, very helpful. Marvelous. Okay, so yeah, as Dr. Okker says there, thank you very much for joining us on this, and we hope that you found this very helpful. It's it's a very expensive item, a microscope. We do understand, you know, people's concerns about choosing the right microscope for live blood analysis, and really that's why we do these Zoom meetings. So if you would like to join us on the training course and you've found a microscope, then please do send in the details of it so we can check and make sure that it's going to be the right microscope for live blood analysis. Because we've so many attendees that have made mistakes that we really don't want to see that again, do we?
Absolutely not. And you know, it's also so difficult if you have a microscope that's not really compatible for live blood analysis. It's also a difficult item to resell. You know, it's not a huge market for secondhand microscopes. So often attendees then are sort of stuck with this microscope that's not suitable, and you have the choice then to, you know, go through an additional expense then to get a better microscope.
So if you don't have any further questions, then we'll bring this to a close. We'll be sending you a recording of this Zoom meeting, and also with the links that we've discussed today, and also with links to the training site and links to the website where you can find information on the microscopes that we recommend for live blood analysis. So anything to add to that, Dr. Okker?
Well, I think just hopefully it illustrated what attendees should be looking at in their microscopes. And you know, as you mentioned, if there are any questions, please feel free to send them through to us. We're always more than happy to go through questions and respond to them.
Marvelous, thank you. Another quick last question. Judy's saying, could you just confirm that we purchase from your website? I can answer that, Fiona. You can email us and we'll send you an invoice for the microscope, or you can buy direct from the website and we'll send you the link to that. Anything to add to that?
No, I think that's all, Elizabeth. I can't think of anything offhand. Usually people also often ask about lead time, actually, you know, how long it would take for it to arrive. Usually if we have stock, the lead time is about 1 to 2 weeks. It takes us about 3 to 5 days to test and set up the microscope. I usually set the microscopes up and check them myself personally before they're sent out to make sure that everything is 100% for live blood analysis. So that takes about 3 to 5 days, and then shipping with DHL is also about 3 to 5 days. We usually do try to keep microscopes in stock, but there are cases where, you know, we're not able to keep up, and you know, then we have to wait for stock to come in. In that case, the lead time could be about 3 to 4 weeks then.
Okay, thanks. And another question from Judy. She asks, what level of magnification would be required to see nanotech? And you mentioned your microscopes may display this. What microscope would be recommended for this?
All right, so you would need to look at something that would have the ability to go up to 4,000 times. So the entry level won't really be ideal. You'll be able to see some of it, but a lot of the structures are quite small, and the additional magnification would be great for that. So any of the other 4 models in the range will allow you to see that. The HDMI LED really has the best combination of features, you know, that allows you to work comfortably and is the most sort of convenient setup. Magnification levels with about 1,600 times on the screen, we're able to see some of the structures. Of course, nano nano means, specific size and often too small for us to actually see with optical microscopy, but these are self-assembling structures. So we're actually able to see them with an optical microscope, especially, clearly in dark field.
Thanks. And also the entry-level microscope is not on the website, so you need to email in for us, email into us, and we'll send you the information on that. So Vernon's saying thank you both, and Fiona's saying thank you. So thank you all very much for joining us, and we'll send you the information, and any questions, just email us and we'll be happy to answer them. So thank you very much for me, and thank you very much, Dr. Okker.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Ciao.
We
Bye-bye.
look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.